everybody, it's great to be back here again. Tomorrow it's Friday, Parashat Ki Tisa. This week's portion we're going to be learning about the sin of the golden calf. And in addition, it's a special, one of those special 4 portions called Parashat Para, where we read about the red heifer. And we know, of course, the connection between the red heifer and the sin of the golden calf. It's a rectification as well. And as we spoke about already in one of my previous lessons about getting ready for the Passover, the purification process before we enter the Passover realm. But today I want to focus on, I first want to begin by a story. I remember years back, many years back, and we were in the situation of everyday terrible terrorist attacks going on here, on Itamar and the surroundings. And it was a lot of fear on the roads. And we were actually wearing bulletproof vests when we were traveling. We didn't know if we'd come back because there was ride-by shootings and ambushes on the way. And a really difficult period we've been through here in building the land, building Shomron, Samaria, of course. It was all over Israel. We all know about the uprisings that took place here. And I remember one time I picked up a couple of hitchhikers that we were going in the direction of the western Samaria. And I had someone in the car with me that was very suspicious, sort of hitting my arm and saying, "These 2 guys in the back look very suspicious." In those times, it can be terrorists that try to they enter cars, and there was also terrorist attacks like that in the past. And we know one time hitchhikers were picked up. They were terrorists, and they blew themselves up near the community nearby Itamar. It happened also. So a lot of things going on. And this person was bumping me, like hinting, this doesn't look too kosher in the back. These people don't look exactly friendly. So what did I do? Was literally my imagination started to run away with me, and I decided to stop the car. And I turned around. I said, "Listen, we're in a difficult time now. I want to see your identification." And they gave it to me. It turned out that they were normal, friendly Jews, but whatever it was, the person next to me was afraid, and that we call, and they were able to convince me with that imagination of theirs. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because this story, one of the greatest enemies of man is imagination. I've spoken about this in the past, and of course, it's one of our best friends. For example, if we're driving in a car and we hear a certain kind of, what does imagination do? The faculty. It reminds us of what memories that we already absorbed in our brain in the past, and we're able to associate things. So for example, you're driving your car and you hear a certain kind of noise in the back. Automatically, you know, that's the noise of a car coming, right? So your imagination puts it all together within a split second, and you're able to realize the car is trying to pass. So the imagination is our friend in simple ways, but it's also a very, very dangerous thing. And it could convince you, just like, for example, I was almost convinced that there were terrorists in our car because of somebody next to me saying, "Listen," putting it all together, and kept nudging me while we were driving. And in a situation where, of course, the situation warranted to be careful, obviously. It wasn't in an empty bubble, but it was in a situation of a terrorist situation, as we know at that time. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that imagination can be very, very misleading and can pull us away in different directions. And for example, today it's become, in modern times with the internet and the Facebooks and all these Instagrams and new things, I don't know all the names of all of them, these social media stuff, it's all about people creating some kind of false image. Like it's literally creating the golden calf, of all these images of who they think they are, imagining it's supposed to be this way, and it's not that way. But they convince themselves they are something they're not. And the whole Hollywood is based on this imagination, and all convincing people to purchase and buy things, people imagining something. It's what attracts people to all kinds of movies, because they actually can live it now. They're in this movie realm, and they're living what's going on over there. Literally, it's taking them away, and they believe that they're the people in the movie, or watching a ball game or something, and they're literally playing ball now. Now, why is imagination can be very, very dangerous. And because it could lead to the worst things it could lead to. And it sort of opposes the truth in the world, right? Someone believes that something is this way, but it's a false, it's a total lie, and he's convinced that that's the way it should be. And we see this happening in our time. All kinds of things are going on, and people, a lot of conspiracy theorists that go out here, and everything is something going on behind the scenes, and all those kind of things. We got to be careful here. It doesn't mean that we have to be obviously just overly the other side, but we have to be careful, and for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We must be careful. And if we see a certain side, like what I did in the car was to stop the car and ask questions. So obviously, certain times we have a doubt, right? When in doubt, you got to clarify, and that's become sometimes very, very dangerous. The entering dangerous waters where you don't know how to distinguish between truth and something that's not with truth and something that's false. It becomes sometimes even difficult to actually know. So that is a very, very important understanding. The reason I mention this, I want to go further and begin to explain a passage in this week's portion regarding Aaron. Aaron, people come along, and I've heard people talk this way, that Aaron, God forbid, was sinned in the golden calf, and that is a false accusation to accuse, God forbid, Aaron, the high priest of Israel, for sinning with the golden calf. God forbid. I've heard some comments on the side of people who made similar comments like that, and those, of course, are not true at all. We have to understand where Aaron's place was in the golden calf, because obviously Moses comes along and he has criticism to Moshe Rabbeinu for it. You have to understand what kind of mindset is going on over here, and I'll come back to what I opened up with. And I'd like to begin, first of all, trying to understand about Aaron and going through some of the verses here. So if we look, and I want to bring down a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of Our Fathers. The Mishnah says, Hillel v'Shammai kiblu mehem. Hillel and Shammai, they received Torah from Shammai of Avtalion. These were their teachers, talking about the period of the Zugot, the doubles. One was the prince of the high court, one was the Av Beitin, right? The head of the court, the father of the court. This is goes way back in the periods of the Tanaim, right before the destruction of our temple, or pre-destruction of our second temple. And they receive from Hillel. What do they say? Omer, they receive their Torah, as they said, from Shmai Vavtayon. And Hillel v'Shammai kiblu mehem. And Hillel Omer, what does Hillel say? Hevei mitalmidav shel Aaron. A person should be a student of Aaron. What is the qualities of Aaron that someone should be a student of his? Ohev shalom v'rodev shalom. Love peace, run after peace. Ohev et habriot. Love mankind. Umikalvan Torah, and bring them back to Torah. So this is the qualities that are outlined over here in the Mishnah. Who was Aaron? Aaron is going down for history as being a person, number one, who loves mankind, who runs after peace. He loves people and he brings people to Torah. This is Aaron. If we go further, I want to bring down, there's a beautiful midrash. It's brought down in Masechet Kala. Masechet Kala is one of the tractates in the oral law, talking about Kala referring to the bride, but it's a lot about ethics. And if you look, we see Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says, Darkan shel Talmidei Chachamim. What is the way of rabbis, of learned rabbis who follow the Torah? Anav u'shval ruach. You have to be modest. Shval ruach refers to humbleness. It goes on to other qualities, and I'm not going to read all the qualities, but those qualities of being a modest and someone who's being humble. It goes on to a fear of sin, and etc. And the rabbis go on to learn out within this Masechet Kala which of the figures in the Bible represent these qualities of these great rabbis of being modest and being humble and loving everybody, loving man. It goes on to a whole list of qualities. And I want to go on here because after it talks about Moses, learning modesty from Moses, it goes on to talk about Aaron. And it says, where do we learn about being humble? Shval ruach. And it says from Aaron, from Aaron the high priest. What does it say? It's brought down in the verse in Malachi. If we look in the verse in Malachi, the verse, it says like this, Torah emet hayta b'fiu, It's referring to Aaron the high priest, and it's saying that he had, this is the way some of the commentators explain it, that Aaron, he had the truth of the Torah in his voice. He had no avla, nothing wrong on his lips. In other words, his heart, his insides and his outsides were the same. He went with me with peace and straightforwardness. And many he brought back from sinning. So we see the praise of the prophet Malachi, praising what it is to be a high priest, what it is to be a Kohen, who's a teacher of Torah, to be able to go out and bring back people that are lost. Bring them back, show them your love, bring them back. Now that was, again, in a nutshell, Aaron, as we spoke about, his greatness, as we see here, loving peace, running after peace. The Masechet Kala actually finishes by mentioning a beautiful response by the nation. It says, Teidalach HaShekem, we should know that Aaron was a person who really showed his love to mankind. And Shekevan Shenifta Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. It says, Vayivku b'nei Yisrael Moshe, Israel cried for Moshe, they mourned their leader Moshe Rabbeinu. U'ba'aron ktib, but when Aaron passes away, what does it say? Vayivku et Aaron 30 yom kol Beit Yisrael. They cried for Aaron 30 days, the whole house of Israel. The women, and then not only the women alone, the children. So the Midrash goes on to say how everybody was crying over the passing of Aaron the high priest. So this all fits together again, that quality we described, the person who's walking with peace and reaching out to others. This is the quality of Aaron. We see, again, stands out so powerfully in the Midrash, and of course in the verse in Malachi. Now, again, if we go back now, and I want to quickly go through the verses in the Torah that describes the dilemma that Aaron is in. Aaron is in a dilemma. It's not a simple situation. It says in Exodus 32, "Vayaram ki boshesh Moshe." The nation sees that Moshe Rabbeinu is not coming back. He's delayed for some reason. Now the Rashi explains right away. It was they miscalculated by a day. L'redet min ha'ar, from coming down from the mountain. Vayakel ha'am al Aaron, and they all gathered over Aaron. And what happens? They said, "Make us, let's get up." He goes, "Make us gods that will go before us." Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't know what happened to him. So here, the nation's in panic. They're afraid they lost their leader. Moshe Rabbeinu said he's going to be back in 40 days. They counted wrong. Rashi's calculations are this: Moshe Rabbeinu had in mind to come back on the 41st day. Right? So if he actually left, Moshe Rabbeinu's plan was to when he went up on the mountain, which was the 23rd of the month of Sivan, and he was supposed to come back on the 17th of Tammuz. That's the day that Moshe had in mind, 40 days later. They counted the day that he went up on the mountain, they counted that day as day number 1. Moshe Rabbeinu began to count on the following day because when the day he went up, it was only half a day. But whatever else he said, he's going to come back. And the 6th hour in Hebrew, boshesh literally means to be delayed, but it also means beshesh, 6. Why? Because the 6th hour of the day is by midday, 12 o'clock. The day starts at 6 in the morning. On the average, we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to come back around 6 o'clock in the afternoon. 12 o'clock in the afternoon on the 6th hour, and they totally messed up the day. They were day off according to Rashi's explanation, and therefore, because of that, right away they began to go wild, and this is where the sin went in. Now here, I'm going to take us back to what I spoke in the beginning. This is connected to the fact they're imagining he's gone. They imagined in their minds that Moshe Rabbeinu is disappeared on them. Okay, and that already leads them. What is the next stage when your imagination runs away from you? Okay, let's create false images, right? Let's create the calf. But anyway, I want to at the same time observe Aaron's dilemma. So Vayom Aleim, what does Aaron do? Aaron doesn't say right away, doesn't yell at them or try to stop them in that way, because as an educator, and he sees what's going on, he knows he's not going to win in that direction. But he goes in a different direction. We'll see what he does. He's trying to delay, stalling tactics. Okay, why don't the women and the children take off their earrings? That's what he says, Neshechem v'nechem, your women and children, 32 verse number 2, and bring it to me. Now look at verse number 3, what does it say? Everyone did it, they all, not only the women and children, but everyone who had their gold rings took them off, and they brought it to Aaron. Everyone did it. So that, what Aaron meant to try to slow him down, he ended up getting a lot of gold. Verse number 4. And he takes it from their hands, and then he puts it in a mold, and then it says, he takes it from their hand, he puts it in a gold, and then look at the next verse in Hebrew, you see it very clearly, Vayasehu. And Vayasehu, they made this image, Egel Masecha, a golden image. Right? They turned this thing into a gold image. Right? So, whatever it is, it seems, if you're looking at the verse, and Vayomu, Vayasehu and Egel Masecha, and then it says Vayomu El Elohei Hazeh, and they said, this is your gods, Israel, that took you out of Egypt. So yes, again, so it says Aaron took from their hands, but it's talking in plural afterwards. So we see that there are others involved. The Torah is hinting to it, just using that verse and saying Aaron took part in order to stall them. But at the end, we see that there were others involved over here. There was another team. There were other people involved that were causing a lot of problems, and we know who they were. They were the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude that came, and they were trying to make trouble, and they were bringing people. They were arousing their imagination. Moshe's gone, and now it's time to make this golden calf. Aaron is trying to delay it all. So what does Aaron do now? Aaron sees, my goodness, Aaron is already beside himself. So he, in verse number 5, he builds an altar. Tomorrow is a holiday. Now when Aaron built this altar, that was his answer. It's a really interesting tactic. What is this tactic all about? His building the altar was, for the people, obviously they believe that they're going to be offerings on that offering to their new golden calf they did. But Aaron, of course, has in mind the whole time that this altar that they built is going to be used for offering to God, of course, this altar. And he says tomorrow, because he knows Moshe Rabbeinu is supposed to come back by tomorrow, he'll be here. He has perfect faith. His imagination is running away from Aaron. He's a person in control of his soul. Right? But what happens? It says the next day they got up early. Aaron was expecting Moshe to come back soon, and apparently Aaron knew. He also, obviously, the fact that Aaron didn't say, "Don't worry, he's coming back tomorrow," Aaron must have misunderstood the calculation as well. But he knew that he would come, that there was some reason for it. So the next day in the morning, instead of waiting it out, Aaron was hoping that they would come, Moshe Rabbeinu already. But they got before the midday. Moshe was supposed to come back by 12 o'clock. So they got up early and they started offering offerings, and they sat where they eating and they were drinking, and they got up to play. And playing refers to terrible crimes were done. As we know, sexual offenses, as well as there was a murder that took place of Chul, the son of Miriam's son was murdered. Chul, who was protesting what was going on over here. So it was a very, very terrible situation that Aaron was in over here. But Aaron obviously was trying the whole time, to make some kind of calm people down, take control of the situation, to try to rectify it and have people return and not, God forbid, go forward on this whole thing, but end up becoming a mess. So again, the imagination, what people ran away, and I said that was a wild imagination, ran away with them, and believed Moshe wasn't here. And it turned, that wild imagination ended up turning into idol worship, sexual offenses, and even a murder took place of a terrible, terrible tragedy, as our rabbis tell us. I'd like to bring down one Rashi here that even explains even more details what was going on over there. And Rashi brings down in verse 4. He says, Egel Masecha. What was this calf that was this golden calf? And Masecha refers to, that was poured. They put it in a mold, and that's how it came out. it was made. It was in a mold, and it came out this golden calf. So Rashi says, "Kivan sheshlichu lakul," they threw it into an oven. Ba'u michashvei erev rav, the witches of the erev rav, the mixed multitude came along. Shalu yimahem mitzrayim, they came out of Egypt with them. V'asa'u, and they're the ones who made it. I said plural, right? They're the ones who made it bikshafim. They made it using their magic. They made this golden calf. Okay. Rashi goes on to bring something interesting. V'yesh omrim Michaya. Others say it was Micha himself. Sheyatsa mitoch dimusei binyan shnitba'ech bo mitzrayim. Some people say it was Micha, as we all know, the famous story in the book of Judges. Pesel Micha, the idol of Micha, who was someone who worshipped idols, and he was one of the children that were placed inside when the bricks of building the buildings in Egypt. He was placed within the bricks. So what happened? He actually ended up getting out. He was saved from that, and he had a tas, a piece of metal, a metal plate that was written that Moses used when he brought out the bones of Joseph out of the Nile. And he threw this thing within the furnace, and then the eagle came out. So some people say it was Mich. Now, I want to go further, one more Rashi to read down. Right. So Rashi talked about the things I mentioned already. That Rashi says Aaron was trying to stall them, and hopefully by that time they would come. Rashi brings all those things. I'm not going to repeat that, but I would like to bring one more Rashi. Rashi says in the beginning regarding Moshe Rabbeinu's he's delaying, not coming down, and Rashi brings down and he says, "Ki zeh Moshe ha'ish." This person, Moshe Rabbeinu. It's the language of the verse is a little strange, and it's saying, it's pointing, this is Moshe Rabbeinu. So Rashi learns something very interesting out of it. Kimin dmut Moshe hera lehem hasatan. He's saying the devil showed them an image of Moshe Rabbeinu, shenosim oto ba'avir, that they're carrying him in the sky to the heavens. Now, what is the deep meaning behind this? Moshe Rabbeinu, the image of Moshe Rabbeinu they're showing in the heavens. And this is what I wanted to strengthen what we're talking about. When imagination runs away with people, they begin to see things. And what is the devil? The devil in Judaism is nothing like the Christian devil, or other religions which understand it's another force that competes with God. No, in Judaism we don't understand it that way. The devil is in a person himself. The devil's within us. The devil, what is the devil? We're not devils, God forbid, but the devil is something called the evil urge. It's an angel. It's within human beings, every one of us. It's a certain evil urge that within a human being to make the wrong decisions. So that we call that a certain God created this, right? It's a part of us that this world is a world of challenge, a world of choices. We have to choose from good and bad. Now, the devil that made people think, it's not literally like a devil comes along holding a pitchfork and saying, "Oh look, there's Moshe Rabbeinu in the heavens." But when you begin to believe and imagine something, then you begin to see it, and they began to say, "Oh, look at that! I just saw like a picture of wasn't that Moses actually up there?" Or something like they're convincing people through this Yetzirah, right? There were those who convinced. We said they're the mixed multitude. This evil urge up there was actually trying to do all kinds of things to work on imaginations, wild imagination of people, and this way it led to what? It led to actually believing that they saw Moshe being taken to the heavens. He's definitely gone. He's not here anymore. Now we have to make this golden image. So here is one side. But I want to show the juxtaposition to that. And here we see, like if we spoke about imagination being our worst enemy, but our best friend sometimes. And here Rav Kook talks about something beautiful. Rav Kook talks about imagination is also there's two kinds of imagination. The low imagination, we spoke about the dangers of imagination, convincing yourself you see things you don't see. But there is something called the high imagination. And that imagination refers to, for example, what went on in our service in the temple. All the service we do in the temple, that making the offerings and the altar and on all the different things that went on. That's an example of physical things that we do to try to awaken our inner spiritual realms. For example, let me give you an example. When a person is praying. When a person is praying, he can just do it in a very, very dry way, or he can try to bring and arouse his emotion, deep emotions, and connect it and make it, unite your emotions with the particular act we're doing in a proper way. And using that imagination, positive imagination, we are helping us rise to higher spiritual levels. Aaron, for example, was the exact juxtaposition of this, what we spoke about before. He was the other side of the picture. He built an altar. He imagined that tomorrow Moshe is going to come back and we're going to be offering offerings on that altar to God. As Aaron says, Chag LaHashem, he uses God's real name, the four-letter name. Aaron had in mind only one thing, to God. That's what Aaron had in mind for, to offering to Hashem. And this was Aaron's way of showing, we're going to turn this terrible tragedy into something good. We're going to take this imagination that people have and use that imagination to say, picture offering to Hashem, the one God of the universe, not false gods. That was the side Aaron was on the whole time. Using his imagination also to imagine these people will turn around their bad ways and throw away their terrible behavior and turn around into human beings that are righteous. So Aaron was praying. This was his way of looking at when a person runs after peace, they look at they imagine the proper side. They try to believe that they're going to leave this terrible way and turn things around. So they're looking at the positive. Moshe Rabbeinu was a teacher who wasn't as honored as much as Aaron, right? As we said before, I brought down the Midrash, was because Moshe Rabbeinu's whole purpose was to be a teacher of Torah, the level of the law. But here we see Aaron has another side, another part of the whole picture. He has to allow and believe that we can run after people and turn people around. This is a whole other purpose he has. And even in the most darkest times of the sin of the golden calf, Aaron is trying to look positive. How can we take something positive out of this act? Of course, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from the mountain and he makes order of this whole thing. Because sometimes you need that, to make order. But we also, of course, can't do without Aaron. And Aaron is running after peace. And we need to have both sides. And that's how we educate and build a proper, healthy country, healthy nation. And if we see, and I want to bring this down, there's a Talmudic passage in the tractate of Sanhedrin, which talks about the courts. Sanhedrin is a court. And it talks about, it's very interesting, and I'd like to quickly just read part of it in page 6b. And it says, Nigmar hadin yatar rashai livtzoah. If the judgment is done, you're not allowed to make compromise. And the Gemara goes on to talk and says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Osher Rabbi Yosef Glili Omer, Asur livtzoah, v'chol habotzei harei zachoteh. Certain Tanaim come along and say, we shouldn't compromise. When it comes to judgment, you got to just do it the way it is. No compromise. Anyone who blesses someone who makes compromise is someone who's actually cursing. It's like cursing God. A very, 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 very strict reaction to compromise. Ella, what does he say has to be done? Whatever the law is, you got to live by the word of the law without moving left or right. Because the judgment is to God. Moshe, and he says Moses, and also it says now the Talmud's reverse is going to talk about Aaron. Aval Aaron, how is Aaron different than Moses? Ohev shalom v'rodev shalom. He loves peace, and he's running after peace. Umesim shalom ben adam lechavero, and he brings peace between one another. And he brings the verse I read about in Malachi, and the Gemara is going back and forth. And talking about, again, here comparing the side of Moshe Rabbeinu. And if we look further down in the Talmud on page 7, it's a beautiful Talmud, I'm not going to go through all the details here. It says, it's brought down by Rabbi Tanchum Bar Chanilai. One of the great Tanaim says, Damar Rabbi Tanchum, One of the great rabbis say, Lo ne'emal mikra ze ela keneged maseh egel. This verse was only said in connection with the golden calf. What is the verse? Vayar Aaron vayiven mizbeach lefanav. Aaron sees what's going on and he builds an altar. Amar Binyamin bar Yefet. Amar Belazar ra'ah chur shezavoch lefanav. He saw the son of Miriam, Chur, who was murdered. Amar ilo shemana lehu. If I do not listen now, hashta avduli kedavdu b'chur. They're going to murder me like they did to Chur. Umekayem bi im yahareg b'mikdash Hashem. Kohen v'Navi says they're going to do with me what they did to Chur. They're going to murder me, and it's going to fulfill what it says in the verse which is brought down by Jeremiah in Lamentations. They will kill in the temple a prophet and a Kohen. V'lo havilei takanta lo, and then there'll be no way of rectifying. So Aaron wasn't worrying about himself being killed. That wasn't the worry. He wasn't worried about that. But the Talmud is saying something very deep. What was he worried about? There would no be way of rectifying. If Aaron, they killed already Chur, who was a prophet, the son of Miriam, and now he was the high priest. If they were going to kill me, and they're going to fulfill the verse that says they will kill in the temple a priest and a prophet, and there will be no more rectification. Mutav de la'avdu le'egel. It's better that they do this. They worship this calf. Ve'efshar havilu takanta b'tshuva, that there will be a way of rectifying through repentance. It's a very powerful Talmud passage. In other words, Aaron is a whole other side picture. The whole thing when it comes to making judgment without compromise. But here we see Aaron was a compromiser. And later on, it goes on the Talmud to talk about how King David was a compromiser. So there are two sides. It's not black and white. But Aaron's compromise was that if I do not act and cooperate with them for the reasons of being able to later on make a change, it'll be too late. And Aaron was talking about the priesthood. He was Aaron, the high priest of Israel. The power that they have from the Kohanim of the Beit HaMikdash, from the true temple, to bring people back. And if Gothbit, he wasn't around anymore, someone who represents running after peace, even in the darkest most times, sometimes you have to make that compromise in order to look for for the future, to be able to make a real change. So Aaron, God forbid, did not, did not agree, God forbid, to the making of the calf and everything else, but he went along with it and had to actually play the part to try to allow, again, the situation of Moshe coming down. Again, Moshe punishes, right? The real ones who were involved were punished. We see that most people weren't punished. But the ones who actually committed the terrible atrocity were punished. But now Aaron was around. He's around now to be able to bring back those on the outside who didn't do the same level. I spoke about this in the past, the different levels of falling into the golden calf. There were different levels there. But Aaron is making a statement that we can't give up on those who have fallen. We have to bring them back. And to wrap things up and try to make order of everything I've spoken about, was that I spoke about the imagination, right? Running away with us, the dangers of imagination. We spoke about how Aaron, on the other hand, represented the true the proper way of using our imagination, as opposed to the sinners of the golden calf. We spoke about what it is to run after peace and to care about every individual and to not want to give up on them and want to bring them back. Because that's what we're here for, to bring people back to the truth. And that was Aaron, who never gave up on his soul. And this whole picture together brings us to the portion that we're going to read, the other portion about rectifying the golden calf, the red heifer, which was a purification, where it was a heifer of purification at the end of the day. But the amazing, mind-boggling difficulty about something that represents purity makes those who are involved in unclean. And that is something really, really fascinating. It's exactly, we see, sometimes we have to get dirty in order to bring people back. And that's where we see Aaron in the mud sometimes, and really having to lower himself, belittle himself, as he did. As Moshe Rabbeinu himself makes the claim, and I want to show that. If we look in the verses in later on in chapter, a little further down in the chapter, I'd like to read some of these verses to you in verse number 21, for example. Moshe Rabbeinu comes along and says to Aaron, what do you do to the nation? And you brought this great sin upon us. Upon them. Aaron says, don't be angry, you know the nation's in trouble. So what does Aaron mean, bira? It means that it's complicated. They have issues. Right? And then he goes on to explain that, he just put it in, it came out. He goes on to explain who's the gold, and he explains what happened over there. And then Moshe Rabbeinu says it all. He says in verse number 25, Moshe Rabbeinu saw the nation that paru means that they were opened up, they were revealed. Their wildness was revealed. Aaron was the cause of that wildness to become out. He says, it will be like a disgrace before those who come against the enemies. They'll look at them, now look what you've done. We know the nations always come and say, how did Israel receive Torah go ahead and do a calf? So it's to this very day, they ask the same questions asked all the time. And then Moses goes along and says, who is with God, come to me. But the point here is that, we call, in Hebrew means, we say dimyon paru, a wild imagination. So I'm saying here, Moshe Rabbeinu is actually saying, look, you revealed the wildness to them. You revealed the wild imagination, I'm trying to say. But in reality, as I said, the red heifer is something that's exactly what it is. It's sometimes, in order to purify, in order to cleanse, we have to ourselves get dirty. And that is, one great important teaching of the red heifer. And that's what Aaron was teaching us about, his love for humanity, a love for his nation, that he was willing to get dirty only for the purpose of cleansing, of bringing purity and cleansing the people of Israel that he loved so much. And later on, as a matter of fact, this week's portion, before it opens up, we read about, in the portion after counting the people of Israel, we read about the kiol, the sink when they have to wash their hands and feet. And that represents the purity, part of the purity process. In the beginning, right before we read about the sin of the golden calf, that connects us to purity. What purity means is cleansing ourselves, and to cleanse in a sense that we know that in the temple they have to clean their feet and their hands. Besides the mikveh, the ritual bath going in, and the feet is something very hard to clean because the feet are always walking. And in a deep spiritual sense, it is the hardest thing for us to rectify our lower extremities. That's the hardest part. And the beauty of the power of the priests in the temple is able to uplift the lowest extremities of the human being to the highest levels. And that, again, brings us back what the temple is all about, to develop the positive imagination of holiness, to bring our emotions, our spirit, our inner essence to connect with our desire and power to love Hashem, to focus all that on God, instead of, God forbid, putting it in the wrong way to imagination. And that, in a little touch upon what Aaron was about, and what the red heifer is all about, purifying ourselves, getting ready for the holiday of Pesach, which is knocking on our door. And I'd just like to end. I know I'm lagging on here today, but what's going on in the world now? I mean, just this week, in Hag, coming along with trying to, they want to, bring Israel to trial. Our soldiers and our officers that went to battle to defend our country. Again, this is a warped imagination of looking at Israel who's defending peace, defending their citizens. But this is imaginations combined with hatred of Israel. And it's such a poison that we have to fight against, and we can't let them get away with this terrible, terrible act that they want to do of bringing Israel to court at the Hag. But anyway, the true court is the court of Hashem, the Sanhedrin, the court of God. It represents peace and justice and true compromise, as we spoke about before, of Aaron. And God willing, we will see great things coming soon. Things are warming up in the world, and great things are about to happen. Shabbat Shalom, Besarot Tovot, Yeshuvot, Benechamot.